如果有留意我上一條片嘅朋友咧，都知道我較早前去咗美國進修啦，學習運動員訓練嘅知識嘅。咁今日呢條片咧就邀請咗成個課程嘅講師 Coach Giovani 去進行一個簡短嘅訪問。Hello everyone, so we have Coach G here, Giovani. So he is the teacher in the performance mentorship phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and also performance coach working in this Exos facility here. Alright, so hi Giovani, so maybe you can start with a self-introduction. So like how many years have you been working, what kind of athletes you're working, and also how do you enter this industry?
Sure, so Giovanni Urrutia, I've been working for Exos for around 8 years now. I've worked with pretty much every sport under the sun. If you could say I had a specialization, it would be tactical first responder community, so military. As far as how I ended up here, working for Exos for 8 years in the role that I am, I should also add that I'm also the tactical education specialist for Exos. So I am one of 2 people teaching Exos methodology across the world. But I went to school for human performance after leaving the military, did my internship at Exos. Did not secure a job from that internship. Unfortunately, more realistically, you kind of have to earn your reps in other places first and compete for a position later. So ended up working out, and it was extremely competitive, as I'm sure most people could imagine, but it's been a wild ride. We like to say here at Exos that you learn in dog years here. So for every year that you spend at an institute is equivalent to 7 years outside of this environment. So I'm very privileged and honored to be a part of this team.
Yeah, I can imagine that. All right, so the next question is, I think a lot of people are actually curious about what different phase of Exos performance mentorship is about, and also want to know more about the XP as the performance specialist.
Okay.
Of course. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So phase 1 through 3 is essentially, well, firstly, let's start with phase 1, because I think this is easiest to understand. Phase 1 is an exposure to our training system. There's a lot of different methods out there. So if I were to say FRC, CrossFit, Derek Hens's running mechanics course, like all these different tools that you have access to, it can be difficult to understand how to use these and integrate these into your practice in an elegant, easily replicable way. If you're working on a small team, you can understand how difficult it can be to take a training, let's say, program, give it to another coach and have them execute it in the same way. We know inherently it's going to be different.
Yeah.
So a training system, what that lets you do is create consistency, ensures everybody's speaking the same language. Phase 1 is all about 8 different components: pillar prep, movement prep, medicine ball, plyometrics, movement skills, strength and power, ESD, and regeneration. These components help us organize all these different training methods that we have access to, so that way we can get results faster.
Yeah.
So that's phase 1. Phase 2, an assumption is made that we now understand just a training system. It doesn't have to be the Exos training system, but rather, now that we understand the basics, let's talk about the hard part, the execution piece, the art and science of coaching. So how do we learn? How do we create environments that facilitate learning? How do we help people move better? And how, most importantly, how do we coach?
Yeah.
Right.
That's the hard part, man.
Yeah, that's the hard part. So like, what does good movement look like? How do I get my athlete to look more like the model?
Okay.
Right. So I would say, you taking phase 2, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Kind of phase 1, kind of an introductory 4 days about what Exos system is about, and phase 2 is kind of how you can be a better coach. I mean, how you are going to coach your clients using the Exos system. Phase 1 is like kind of a taste of it, and then phase 2 is how to be a better chef to cook it.
That's great. Yeah, I open up phase 2. You'll remember this with this idea of understanding what's the difference between a mediocre coach, a good coach, a great coach. These are things that are not mysteries. We know what they are. So let's teach you what those strategies are so we can get you moving fast.
Exactly.
When I say you, I mean the coach. Yeah.
All right, cool.
And that's phase 2. Phase 3 is about understanding, we're diving a lot deeper into specific methodology. So for our phase 3, we're going to be going over force plate analysis, athletic profiling, the methods behind hypertrophy, nutrition, injury management. So a lot more specific.
Yeah.
And at the end of this, phase 3, you're going to be expected to create a program using 2 different athletes that I already have previously selected.
Okay.
Can you create a program that makes sense? By this point, usually most people can. And then most importantly, can you defend the choices that you made?
I see.
Yeah. So it's a lot more cerebral and not so much, hey, here's how you coach absolute speed. Rather, I program absolute speed with this intention.
It's like from a more macro standpoint, right?
Yeah, bigger picture.
Yeah.
Like as if I was on your team.
Mm-hmm.
You wrote a 6-month-long program for an athlete that we're going to be receiving, and I'm helping you evaluate the effectiveness of that program.
Cool. So, because just a lot of people think, to be a good coach is about how to execute. I mean, how to coach people in the weight room. But I mean, Exos Phase 3 is probably about, to coach or to make result. It doesn't only about in the weight room. It's about how to a bigger planning.
Yeah, if we had to use your cooking analogy, phase 1 is taste, and phase 2 is like how to cook it. Yeah. Phase 3 is like, let's talk about the ingredients that you need to have on hand. Ooh. Let's talk about the layout of the kitchen. Yeah, and let's talk about the people on your team. Yeah. So your sous chef and your pastry chef and all that stuff. Yeah. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great analogy, man.
Yeah. Well, hey, you started.
Yeah. I'm talking to myself.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So and then here now we proceed into the next questions, which is also a tough one. So, what's the biggest lessons learned throughout your career?
Okay, I'm glad. That's an awesome question. I think it's important, and I think it's a good lesson here, is that you have to constantly reevaluate yourself. Part of the phase 2, one of the fun parts about phase 2 is like people are forced to be put in a situation where they have to evaluate themselves. Yeah. And they have to tell us like what they thought they went right with their session, because there's an evaluation component with phase 2. Yeah. What went not so right. So anyway, if there's one lesson I learned from the beginning to the end, and it still applies, is you cannot get comfortable. You will always be found. If you get comfortable, that means that you're not learning. And then you're going to be found with a situation where reality hits you and a mistake will be made, and it was because you got too comfortable. So to that end, like I have found that every time that I go into an environment where I'm working with an athlete where I assume I know nothing, even though I know all these things, but I assume I know nothing, that leads to the potential to get really effective outcomes. So I guess what I'm saying, if we could sum that up with one word, it would be humility. Okay. Because I've just been found, like every transformative moment that I've had in my coaching career has been preceded by, I think I'm starting to get it. Mm-hmm. And then something happens. And it's like,
and it turned out, no, I don't get it.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, if I ever feel like I'm getting a little comfortable, okay, I got to take a step back and let's reevaluate. Yeah. That's a dangerous place to be.
I got that. So, well, people always think, step out of your comfort zone. There's that phrase, or people always say, step out of your comfort zone. Well, it is not like, it is real. I mean, it is about our job every day, because like especially about human performance, it is not like calculation. It's not like pure calculations that for physics or maybe for math, if you plug 1 + 1 is always equal to 2, right? But in human performance, when you're talking about human bodies, there's a lot of possibilities. So if you think you know them all, that's probably the moment that you're about to fuck up.
Yeah, I would agree. Like it's just, I have a friend that used to say comfort killed the cat. So we have an idiom in English that's like curiosity killed the cat. Yeah. He says comfort killed the cat. And I think it applies. It's just, and there's so many we were talking about that athlete, the football athlete, where, we had to be very specific. That program is not going to work for somebody else. And I have to recognize, like, the next person that comes in, it's going to be another new case.
Yeah. I mean, always.
I can't treat them the same.
Exactly. Okay, so let's proceed to the next questions. Is comparing you, Giovani, now in 2022 with you back then in first year in the industries. So what do you think are the biggest difference?
I say less. I say a lot less than I used to. So before I didn't know what was important. Mm-hmm. So I would explain a lot and try and like
impress the client.
Yeah, right. Like, I need to know what I'm talking about, so let's talk a lot. It's like, no, you don't need to do that, right? I also think I was too hard
Okay.
I had a very if Coach Jair was another coach that was helping me teach this phase 2, and I remember one day he came back from teaching internationally, and he could hear me coaching I was at the track side, and he could hear me coaching from the parking lot. That's how loud I was.
Wow.
And these are middle school kids.
Okay.
Because I was really loud. So I think what the difference here is, if there is a word to describe the difference between how I used to coach, which was very loud, brash, and like super high energy, now is more elegant.
Oh wow.
There's an elegance.
That is the word that can only be used in a very experienced coach. I mean, there's not a lot of coach dare to say that, but they coach elegantly, man.
Yeah, I guess that's not a word most people would use. But yeah, so like there are things, for example, even inside, because we are coaching phase 1 and phase 2. I'm teaching it. Yes, it's a primary thing, but there are certain things, seeds that I will plant, like in the beginning of day 1, phase 1, that will show up the last day in phase 2. And the athlete, the student, does not know that. It's the same thing with coaching. Like I'll set them up with a particular exercise, something very small, with the intention of like 2 weeks later it shows up again, and now it just happens. So that was not possible before when I first started, because I didn't know what was important.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that requires a lot of experience.
I suppose. Yeah.
For the record, so Giovani has been coaching for so long that that's your goal to work towards, but doesn't mean you have to do it now or you can do it now. It is okay if you can't do it, because it takes a lot of hard work and experience and failure to reach to this.
And that's where learning happens. It's the failure piece. Like again, I didn't know what was important, but you have to every session, if you want to get good, you have to sit there. You have to
reevaluate
everything. Like what went right, what went wrong, what could I do better? Here's what I'm going to do next time.
Yeah. Okay.
All constantly.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so we'll continue the interview here because the phone was overheat. I mean, too hot under the sun. So we moved to our indoor area. All right, so let's continue the interview, G. So the question is, can you list 3 most important skill that or characteristic that a good coach should have?
Yeah. So first thing that comes to mind is savoir. I'm not French, but savoir faire, but essentially SAVOIR FAIRE. What that's meaning, or what it refers to, is being able to think on your feet. Many times I've coached a team or organization, and let's say 10 people show up, and a guy that wasn't injured before now is dealing with an injury. Or you notice that everybody's exhibiting a particular dysfunction that you haven't seen before. You need to be able to change the environment to get them to move the way that you need to right now. You don't have time to explain it. Or let's say in my setting, you have 3 racks or squat racks that you can use, and all of a sudden now you only have 2. Well, that doesn't mean that you're going to have an argument. That doesn't mean that you're going to go home. You got to figure something out. So that's the first quality. The second quality, which is related to that, is good preparation. So preparation is going to save you, on the front end, is going to save you. Think about it like this. I think sometimes people forget. If we're practitioners in this space, when I'm teaching a phase 1 through phase 3, whatever, when I'm teaching, that is my event. So it's important that I'm rehearsing all the particular things that go into that event, because that's my sport.
Yep.
It's the same thing with coaching. You should know what you're going to be able to do from a preparation standpoint. Walk in and have a plan and rehearse that plan prior. It's so much to the point where it becomes automatic, like breathing. That will free you time to think on your feet.
Okay.
So I guess being able to think on your feet, and then secondly, good preparation. The third thing is a great understanding of principles, because again, it's a similar situation. If you understand the principles, for example, we talk about coiling and uncoiling in phase 1 and 2. Certain patterns the human body is able to express. Those are shapes. If I understand the shapes, I just took one of the guys downstairs, you saw me with him, he doesn't like getting on the ground to do corrective work. It does not mean that we don't do corrective work. So I showed him different movements that still did the same thing, because I understood the shapes of the principles behind. And I guess that's what the last thing is.
Yeah.
So again, being able to think on your feet.
Good preparation work.
And understand the principles like really deeply.
Yeah, that's actually a very good reminder for all the coach. So when you think, okay, these methods works for me, but or when you learn new techniques, you don't only learn the techniques, but also you learn why the techniques works. That's the principles, right? When you know the principles, then you can maybe, I'm not telling you shit, but you can actually develop your own methods.
I would say that's accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard me say it a lot. I'll have certain exercises. Somebody's asked me, I can't tell you how many times.
Giovani special.
Yeah. What do you call this exercise? Giovani special, man. I don't know.
Okay.
Because it's just.
For the records, there's a tons of Giovani specials that I don't know how to write in my notes. But that works. I mean.
Yeah. Because I'm looking at shapes. I'm not looking at the exercise. There's no manual for some of the stuff that we're trying to do. So sometimes I'll create an exercise that gets the thing that I want, because the traditional exercise wouldn't have worked. So let's say you're doing a rear foot elevated split squat wrong. Well, maybe we can create an environment that gets it right, but now that's not written down anymore. As far as like how to do it, that's not in a book.
So well, again, it takes a lot of like time, experience to develop, to understand the principles, but doesn't mean you should not try to. All right, always when you learn something new, always try to understand the reason behind that, and then you won't get into that deep immediately, but every time you try to dig deeper, and that's how you become a better coach, man.